0425W1. It is January 10th, 2022. I am Administrative Judge Martha Russo, and I have been designated to adjudicate this appeal. The appellant is self-represented, and the agency is represented by Andrew Howell, Brian Upshur, Claudine Landry, and Jean Heiser. I'm conducting this hearing via Zoom for government. The parties, their representatives, and all approved witnesses are appearing by video conference. Sarah Ray has been designated as the official hearing reporter. I issued a pre-hearing order in this matter on January 3rd, 2022. Before we went on the record, both parties confirmed that they received a copy of that order. Following my issuance of that order, the appellant filed objections with regard to my denial of her second motion to compel and my denial of her request for testimony from Michael Greeley and Michael Ledford. Those objections are part of the record, Ms. Kouemo. However, I want to make clear that my rulings on those matters are unchanged for going forward with today's hearing. The appellant also objected to any use of her deposition transcript at the hearing. At the pre-hearing conference, I explained that I will not afford any evidentiary weight to the transcript aside from any use for impeachment purposes and the use that I'll discuss here in just a moment. So Ms. Kouemo, if the agency does seek to use the transcript for impeachment, you may assert your objection to that use at that time. Ms. Kouemo also moved to late file certain pre-hearing exhibits. I granted that motion, and she submitted those exhibits on January 6th. Those exhibits are found at tabs 46 through 51 in the board file, and they are admitted to the record. In addition, on January 6th, the agency filed a written motion for sanctions based on the appellant's purported non-compliance with my pre-hearing order. So specifically in my pre-hearing order, I ordered the parties to, this is the quote, engage in good faith discussions regarding stipulations as to the contents of 2 audio recordings prior to the hearing, end quote. The appellant filed a response to the agency's motion on January 7th. As an attachment to its motion, the agency provided an email exchange from January 5th in which the agency proposed that the parties stipulate to the accuracy of transcripts of the audio recordings that were made at the appellant's deposition. The agency attached to its email to the appellant relevant portions of that transcript. In her email response to the agency, the appellant said, "I have not opened the attachments," and then she stated that she would not agree to the agency's proposal. That email is located at board tab 53, page 60. The appellant also asserted patently unreasonable objections to the submission of the records based on timeliness and the agency's failure to produce the recordings through discovery, despite the undisputed fact that the recordings were made by the appellant and were in her possession. The next day, January 6th, the appellant informed the agency she had reviewed the transcript, but objected to the portions that were marked inaudible. She also said that time constraints prevented her from correcting the transcript that day. That email is found at board tab 53, page 75. In her response to the agency's motion, the appellant acknowledged she did not open the attachments to the agency's email, and she only made assumptions which were incorrect about the contents of those attachments. The email also suggested, or the appellant also suggested, she did not have a reasonable chance to review the accuracy of the transcript. I find the appellant did fail to engage in good faith negotiations regarding stipulations as I ordered. She initially declined to even review the agency's proposed stipulations. She then asserted unreasonable objections, and then at the 11th hour, she asserted a lack of time to comply with my order. While she claimed she did not have time to review the accuracy of the transcript excerpts, I note they were only 21 pages long in large font, and she did not even attempt to begin that process until the day after the agency sent the transcripts to her. The agency sought sanctions in the form of dismissal of the appeal or an inference regarding the appellant's credibility. I find those sanctions are not necessary to serve the ends of justice here. However, I admit the transcripts to the record, that is the portions of the deposition transcripts that capture the contents of those audio files. Those are found at board tab 53, pages 32 to 43, and pages 50 to 58. To the extent the appellant disputes the accuracy of those transcripts, I will draw an inference that the transcripts are accurate. So because those transcripts are in the record, Mr. Howell, I'm going to reject the audio recordings that the agency is submitting by mail, and those will be returned to the agency. I believe there are no other pending motions before me. Is that correct for the agency?
Yes.
And is that correct for the appellant? You're on mute, Ms. Kouemo.
Yes, Judge. At this time, there is none, but I would like to know if it is still something that is possible between now and tomorrow at the end of the hearing.
If what is still possible, Ms. Kouemo?
To submit a motion.
What sort of motion? I'm a little unclear on what you're asking, Ms. Kouemo.
Yes, I'm wondering if it's possible for me to still submit a motion between now and tomorrow, between now and the close of the end of the hearing.
You can submit a written motion at any time. You can also make a motion now orally. So is there something you were wanting to move for at this time, Ms. Kouemo?
I would like to, I'm not, I needed to look at the exact legal wording, but I would like to submit a motion because the, sorry, the lights went out here, because the agency submitted a correction of the record, and that document was material, and I would like to know if it's possible to request that a defense be introduced for sorry about that, I'm having a blank, for procedural error. I'm sorry, I forgot the exact legal term, but for error on the part of the agents, on the agency in its attempt to build a case to terminate me.
Okay, I'm a little unclear. I think you're referring to the agency's notice of the correction of the record, which was filed on January 6th. That's at board tab 45, where the agency indicated that it had not, in fact, provided you a letter of counseling on July 27th. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And your request, what you're expecting to move for, is what exactly, Ms. Kouemo?
I would like to know if it's possible to enter a defense on procedural mistake on the part of the agency.
I don't know what you mean by enter a defense.
And that's why I'm sorry, just that's okay, why I want to ask you to give me to allow me to look for the exact legal term so that there won't be any confusion.
Okay. You can certainly file a motion at any point, Ms. Kouemo, and I can consider that motion and make a ruling on it at that time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. But at this time, you don't have any other motions pending before me. There are no other live motions from you. Is that right, Ms. Kouemo?
It is right.
Okay. Is there anything else that the parties would like to address before we move on to taking evidence? Agency?
Just in response to this proposed motion, I mean, that was a factual error that we discovered, and we corrected the record, which we believed was our duty to do as soon as we discovered it, which was on Thursday. So I don't think there was a procedural error. It was a factual mistake. We discovered it, and we corrected the record, and the agency can stipulate that that letter did not get issued. That is what we were intending to do there.
Okay. Well, if she files a written motion, Mr. Howell, you'll certainly have an opportunity to respond to that. Right. Is there anything else you wanted to place on the record before we move forward to testimony, Ms. Kouemo? And you're on mute.
No, Judge.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I understand, Ms. Kouemo, you will be presenting testimony first as your first witness. Is that correct?
Yes, Judge. And I have a question about that because I don't know whether I should be asking you questions and responding or just speaking.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Kouemo, and I apologize for not addressing that at the pre-hearing conference. You may testify in whatever format you feel most comfortable. You can either pose questions directly to yourself and then answer them. Sometimes parties feel like that seems a little too artificial and they prefer just to speak in narrative form, and that is perfectly fine. So however you're most comfortable proceeding, if you just want to speak and tell me all of the facts that you'd like me to consider from your perspective, that's perfectly fine.
Thank you, Judge.
Do you want just a moment, Ms. Kouemo, before you begin your testimony to think about that, or are you prepared to move forward now?
I think I can move forward now.
Okay. Very good. All right. So, Ms. Kouemo, before you testify, I do need to swear you in. So if you would please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you are about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you, ma'am. You may lower your hand. All right, so again, Ms. Kouemo, how this will work is that you will provide your testimony. After you've finished, the agency will have an opportunity to cross-examine you. Then you'll have another chance to clarify any matters that were addressed in your cross-examination, and then the agency will have a final opportunity to recross you. After that, you'll be dismissed from testifying, and we'll move on to the next witness. So you may begin at any time you're ready.
In 2020, on April, in late May, I applied for a position attorney advisor position with the agency, and I was able to get that position. And I received my. I went to the EDC office on April 7th to start working as an attorney, and the training lasted about 2 or 3 days. And during that training, I did not get any training. During that orientation phase, I did not get any EEO or Fair Act training. And I was in the class with other attorneys and paralegals. And afterwards, we moved to the floor where we continued. We actually started training on the tasks that we would be performing. I started working in the accounts department. That's the bank that hired me. And I worked there as I worked in the accounts department first in that first position on the floor at the PDC, not remotely, and that lasted about 3 or 4 weeks. And then afterwards, I requested to work remotely because of the coronavirus pandemic, and that request was granted. And I went to start working remotely from home, and shortly afterwards, maybe a week or so after I went home to work, I was transferred to the loan processing department, where I worked mostly as a loan officer, processing loans in a new system that the Office of Investor Assistance had just acquired for the COVID-19 pandemic. And during that time, which started, I started working as a loan officer around April 27, and either at that time or shortly afterwards, I went into under the leadership of Mrs. Latisha Parham, and so we reviewed files, applications that people have submitted for the EIDL loans, which are business loans, but for the disaster, for the COVID-19 disaster. And we reviewed those files to make sure that the loan applications were complete, that the information that the applicants had provided was accurate. So we did a little bit of research of our own, things like looking up the company's website, if there was one available, trying to locate the company, if Google Maps, for example, will allow it, things of that nature. And we will contact the applicants to verify, to go through the application and verify things like the names, and the types of business, and all the details about the application. We will run things like credit checks, and we will perform basic. I believe those are basic loan officer duties. So we will contact the applicants usually by. We were encouraged to contact I was encouraged to contact the applicants by email and by phone. So I will usually send them an email and then call them also. And when the application was complete, we had all the information that we needed, financially and otherwise. Then based on the criteria that were given to us, we will recommend either an approval or a denial of that application. And so that process could be very quick if the application itself was pretty complete. Was pretty complete, yes. And the basic research that we did checked out. We could process an application in as little as I think it could be 10 minutes if we had everything, or if we needed to contact the applicant to verify some information or acquire more additional information and things like that. It could take a few days. After the recommendation, the application will get reviewed by somebody else. That's what we were told, but we did not have access to. We couldn't decide who will do the second level review, if any, and occasionally the application will get sent back to us if we made a mistake, or the second level reviewer wanted us to contact the applicant again to correct something in the file, or something like that. So during that time, there was a change of in the procedures that we were given. At some point, we were told by email or MS Teams chat by our team lead at Japan that we now had to make some changes to some of the requirements that we had that we were told at first to put into place, and some of those changes impacted applicant businesses that were partially owned, that were owned by more than one person, and the requirement was specifically touched on the immigration status of the person, or the eligibility of the person based on their immigration status or their citizenship status. So basically, it impacted files that had where applicants had less than, where one applicant had less than where a U.S. citizen had less than 50% of ownership. So basically, before that, we were told to for eligibility requirements, as far as the immigration status of the applicants would go, we were told to recommend for denial the files that were a U.S. citizen or qualifying immigrant who have less than 51% of ownership, and then the new notice changed it to 50%. Because when I received that notification from my team lead, I believe that it was. I wonder, because we're not given any instructions to notify people that we had worked, whose file we had worked on before. So I contacted my team lead to inquire as to what will happen to those who had applied for the same loans since we had begun working on the loan applications for the pandemic, and whether they will get a notification that the rules have changed, and that if they met that criteria, whether they may qualify for the loans. And my team lead informed me that there wasn't such a thing being discussed in management just yet. And she said that, and I asked her. I told her specifically. I mean, she said that it would be too cumbersome for the office to do that at that point. And I told her that because of the number of files, and I told her that it was a simple thing to just draft a letter that could go to the same letter could go to every applicant, and just they could just change, for example, the address, the place where they will be, where the address will go. So they could just draft a template and then use that template to send out notices. And as far as if the number of applications was an issue, then they could narrow it down by looking in the system that we were using. Whenever we recommend an application for denial, they were check. There were areas where we could check the reason for the recommendation. So for the eligibility one, I told her that they could just go into the files that were denied for eligibility reasons, or including other reasons, and then notify those applicants if they didn't want to notify everybody. And I believe my team lead told me that it was a good idea, but she repeated the fact that there wasn't any attempt for the agency to do that at that point. So I asked her. I told her that a few days before that rule change, that I had worked on a file where an applicant had denied. I recommended for deny an application where the applicants were under the rule change that applicant will qualify for the loan. And I asked her whether it would be okay for me to contact the applicant or those applicants to let them know the rule change. And she said that I shouldn't do that because it will open a can of worms. And I thanked her for her advice, but because I didn't have peace of mind, I went ahead and contacted the applicant. It was right after I received the notification. I mean, I saw the notification. So, but it wasn't. I don't know if it was the same day or the day after, but I didn't wait enough time to contact them. And I sent them an email, and I called them to make sure that they got the email. And the applicants told me that they were thankful. I talked to the applicants were a father and son, and I talked to the father. When I called, it was the father that picked up at the business, and he told me that they had just received my email, and he was thankful for that. That he would tell his son because his son was the U.S. citizen, and the father was an immigrant that didn't qualify based on the SBA, the ODA criteria for qualifying immigrants. So when he confirmed receipt of the email, I thanked him and I hung up. And then about sometime later, the son sent me an email, and when I had sent the email, at first I had told them that they could appeal the loan because I knew, based on my reading of the SOP, that there was a process for appealing the loans, and we were told anyway to tell people that thought they were only denied to appeal, and it was called reconsideration. So I told them to apply for reconsideration, and the applicants, I'm going to say, contacted me about sometime later, days later, to tell me that they had followed my advice, they had gotten denied. I told them, well, you should reapply for the loan then, if you were denied they told me that they were denied before the previous time, so I told them they just reapply then. And then reapplied, and then they told me again, they contacted me again to tell me that they had reapplied and they had gotten denied again. And they were, I believe that they told me they were denied based on the previous denial, or something like that. And at that point, I told them I was out of options, and I recommended that they contact an attorney to help them further. And so I had multiple contacts with those applicants by email and by phone. I did not delete, even though I knew that my emails were being monitored by management. I did not delete those emails. I did not delete my conversation with my team lead on MS Teams because I didn't want to act as if I was hiding something. So after, and I want to mention also that those applicants, I remember that they were illegal. I mean, they were father and son. What I remember was that their names sounded like they could be from East Africa, possibly Kenya, because I had friends in the past that were from Kenya, so those names sounded Kenyans. And I remember also thinking when I opened their file the first time that I remember thinking, it's interesting that some African immigrants chose a cold state to live in. I also remember that I found it interesting that the business, the way they identified the business in the loan application was as a tobacco store, tobacco shops. So those are the details that I remember from that application. Because I wrote a lot of things down, I believe that I wrote something down about those communications with them in my notes, in my handwritten notes. But unfortunately, I turned those notes over to the agency when I resigned in August. drinking. So after I made those disclosures, I was still working under Mrs. Parham, but then I soon transferred to not long after that, not long after me being under the leadership of Mrs. Parham, I was transferred back to the accounts department, where I was under the leadership of Mrs. Erica Rivera, and Mrs. Rivera had been my supervisor when I first worked at the SBA in 2017 to 2018. For about 4 months, I worked in the legal department, legal department, with attorneys only. And so she was my supervisor one more time in 2020. And at first, my team lead was Scott Montgomery, if I remember his last name correctly. I worked, when I transferred back to the accounts department, we still had some type of loan officer functions, but our functions were more regarding funding. So we were in the funding group. It was a very large group, funding group, where our tasks were mostly to verify the banking information and other things that were money related regarding the file. And there were different rules that we had to apply and things like that. So we did that for, I think I transferred back to the accounts department around June 19. And I stayed in that department, on that team, in the larger team, for almost 2 weeks, until early July. Yes, I'm going to say roughly 2 weeks. During that time, on June 22nd, I got sick, so I called in sick. I didn't go to work on June 22nd, 23rd, and 24th. On June 24th, I went to the emergency room very early in the morning. I actually went to the agency room around 2 a.m. or so, and I called my team lead around 4 a.m. and I called him on his work phone, and I left him a voicemail to let him know that I was at the hospital and that I may not be available by phone because I was doing some tests and some other things. I called him, I left him a message, but I also emailed him maybe an hour later so that to make sure that he got my message. And then around 7:30, he emailed me back and he told me that Mrs. Rivera required that I submit a doctor's note before I return to work. And about an hour and a half later, he sent me the email. I'm sorry, he sent me Mrs. Rivera's email and phone number, and then I told me that she was requesting that I contact her. Around 10:30 or so, I sent him an email to tell him that I would call Mrs. Rivera later in the day after leaving the AR because I was still being. I just wasn't available really to for such discussions at that time. Shortly afterwards, I received an email from my team lead where he forwarded me the email from Mrs. Rivera where she requested that I text her. Shortly afterwards, I text her because it seemed, because of the multiple contacts or the multiple emails, it seemed as if she wanted to talk to me as soon as possible. So I went ahead and texted her. She she asked me if I was okay, and I told her that at that exact time I had nurses that had come into the room for some other test, and I told her I'm going to talk at that time, and then I let the nurses help me, and then as soon as I could move and do things, I texted her back, and I told her that I was feeling much better than when I came in, which was true. And she asked me whether my disease was COVID related, and I told Mrs. Rivera that it was not, because I did not have any COVID symptoms. And then the doctors had not told me that it was COVID. And then the reason why I went to the ER was not because I had COVID symptoms, at least as far as I knew. And then because of the emails that I had gotten, before I left the hospital, I talked to my doctor, and I told him that I needed leave. I needed a doctor's note that would allow me to go back to work the next day, because it seemed that my managers really needed me back. So he recommended against it, but then he gave me that letter, and he included. I told him that he needed to specify whether I had COVID or anything like that. I believe he did. So the next day I went back to work, still not feeling up to par, and I provided my supervisor. I provided Mrs. Rivera with the doctor's note. On July 4th, I was moved from the larger funding team to a smaller team that was called funding triage team. It was a team of maybe roughly about 15 people or so, and we were told it was funding triage. So I received that notification, I believe on Saturday, July 4th. And then on Sunday, July 5th, I received an email about a tentative promotion from a conditional promotion from a DS9 to a DS11 status. So, I was excited about the promotion, but I didn't know what I really didn't know what the funding triage team would be about until I started working in the funding triage team. I believe it was on Monday or a few days later. And then I realized that it was just basically data entry. So our assignment was to use a spreadsheet where we had the names of loan applicants. And we were to the loan numbers. I don't remember if we had the names. We had the loan numbers, and we were supposed to copy those loan numbers one by one, go into the system that we were using to keep track of the loans, enter that information, open the file, scroll down on the first page all the way down, look at the bottom and see whether we had anything in red that indicated that the funding of the applicants then didn't go smoothly because of banking issues or things like that. And then we had to copy that information, whether it was green, red, and then put it back in the spreadsheet. And then we had to go back to the spreadsheet and then do the same thing for the next applicant. So when I was assigned to that team, I was hoping that it was temporary, that it was short-term, very short-term. But as I found out, it wasn't. And I was kept on that team for about 5 weeks. During my time on that team, because I was so bored, I will occasionally work a lot and then read a little bit of the SOP or read a little bit just to have something intellectual in my mind. I kept track of my numbers based on what I saw in the spreadsheet how the other people were performing their subject. I wasn't doing badly. And so I stayed on that team, hoping that every day that it would be the last day. So I did that. I worked on that team, and then one day I received a notification. Sorry, just a moment. One day I received a notification through my emails that there had been some training. Somebody in another SBA office had conducted some training on reconsideration for EIDL loans, which were loans we were working on. So I thought that it was interesting, and I reached out to that person and asked her if she would be available for a phone call, just because I just wanted to know a little more about the reconciliation process. Because we had been told to refer people to the reconciliation process, but we had not been told much about that reconciliation process. I thought it would be helpful so that, when referring applicants, I will know what to tell them, how to apply for reconciliation or anything like that. So out of curiosity and desire to learn something, I did go ahead and I made that phone call. I arranged a phone call with that colleague in another office, and she told me about the reconciliation process. She gave me some links that I could access to learn more about it and things like that. So I was surprised that somebody that worked in another office was doing ODA task, and she had told me during her phone call that it wasn't her main assignment, that she was on a temporary assignment with the ODA just to help them during the pandemic for a little bit of time. And I thought that it was interesting. I asked her what she was doing in real time or in real life or normally, and she started to explain her duties, and the more she talked about them, the more interesting they sounded to me. So I kept asking questions, and that's why it was fascinating. I took a lot of notes, and I submitted those notes, and they are in the file. And during that phone call, at some point, she had to go do something, and she told me that she had a colleague that she was also working with that in the same office that she was also working with, and that could be someone else I could talk to about their duties at that office. So I believe she reached out to that colleague to make sure that she was available or something like that, and then I learned on the phone call with that other colleague. And both calls lasted for under an hour, and we talked about SBA. It was all about SBA issues. For instance, they were telling me after the first 15 or so minutes when we talked about reconciliation with the first colleague that I called, we talked about what they were doing, and what they were doing was basically going to the community and speaking about SBA loans and how people could apply for loans, the types of programs that they had, I thought it was interesting how they reached out to people, how they made presentations and things like that. And during that phone call also, because it seemed that I was so interested in what they were doing, they told me that if I was interested in doing some detail work like they were doing with the ODA, then I could also do some detail work in another office if I was interested in doing that. And I thought that it was interesting, and they told me that I could request that from my managers, or something, that there was something that the MSPB did all the time for short periods of time. So I didn't think much of that phone call, except that I was trying to learn something new. To me, it wasn't any different from reading the SOP, or like I had done so many times before, going into the SBA system for personnel my personal page and completing some trainings, just random trainings that I was, about SBA things I was interested to learn about. So many of those trainings, for example, were just about, for example, learn about the different types of loans that the SBA offered, or management things, how to be a good manager, or things like that. Anything that I found in that database that seemed like it could be interesting to learn about, I would just click on it and listen to whatever was being said, and that's how I kept myself, how would I say that, occupied when there were gaps in between assignments, because there were often gaps in between assignments, or when, for example, the system would be slow, or there will be another issue that could that would give me some time, or even when I was on the data entry team from time to time, when I thought my numbers were very good, and I thought I could do something quick for 15 minutes or something, I would go there and either read my SOP a little bit, or do something like that. So after that phone call, I notified my team lead immediately. When I believe towards the end of the phone call, the other person I was talking to told me, "Hey, you should probably submit an annual leave. Remember to submit a leave request." And I thought that it was interesting because until that point I didn't think much of that call. I thought that it would fit in my duties completely. But since she mentioned it, I thought, well, out of an abundance of precaution, I should go ahead and do that. So I notified my team lead right afterwards, and I submitted an annual leave request. And after submitting an annual leave request, I believe it was the same day that I was a little late. I believe it was that same day after lunch. I was a little late, and I had to submit an annual leave request for 15 minutes or so. And so for that day, I had an hour and 15 minutes of annual leave that I had submitted. And the next day, I talked to. I received Mrs. Rivera asked me to talk to her, and we talked through MS Teams, and she did tell me to go ahead and submit the annual leave request, and then that was on July 9th, and then on July 10th, that's when I talked to Mrs. Rivera, and she told me to submit an annual leave. A leave. She said leave, and I assumed that it was an annual leave, so I did submit an annual leave request. On July 17th, I notified my team lead that I was running a little late because I had a personal emergency, and that I will get to work about 2 hours later. And I got to work. When I got to work, I submitted an annual leave notice or request, and the email when I sent that morning, when I notified my team that I was running late, she did respond, and she told me that she had gone the message. And then as soon as I got there, I sent him another. I sent her another email to tell her that I was at work. The same day, I asked my team lead that day whether I could use another type of request instead of using annual leave, because I was thinking about saving my annual leave credits, and and whether I could skip lunch that day because I will be working less hours, and because I was told that I wouldn't be able to work all the time. Because in the private sector you could, for example, work 6 hours straight. I asked whether that was possible, and my team lead, who at that time was Mrs. Carol Holloway, she referred me to Mr. Christopher Martin for further explanation. And Mr. Martin was also a supervisor, at the PDC. Told me that he would call me to explain the procedure, and then we talked over the phone, and he told me that I had to request leave for the absent, but then he said that there was another type of leave, because I told him that I wanted to save my annual credits, and then he told me that there was another type of leave that was called LWOP, leave without pay, that I could request so that I could basically not get paid for that leave. And I told her, I said, well, that sounds great. I think that's what I'm going to do. But I was thinking about saving my annual leave credits for future use. And then later that day, after I forgot Mr. Rivera, Mr. Martin, Mrs. Rivera contacted me to ask me who had approved my annual leave request in the system. And I responded, and I told her that no one had beforehand, and that I had an emergency, and that I would also like to use leave without pay instead of leaving annual leave to save my annual leave credits. So at that point, Mrs. Rivera asked me for a brief explanation. So that she could send that request to management. And I saw that email on Sunday. No, she sent it on Sunday, on July 19th, and I saw that email on Monday. So on Monday, on the 20th, I provided her with explanations of each one of the 3 annual leave requests that I had already submitted, and I did that early in the morning. Unfortunately, after lunch, I went over my lunch break by about 5 minutes, which included 1 minute after 2 p.m. And based on the information that I had received, and as far as I understood it, that meant that I wouldn't be able to work all the time. I notified my team immediately as soon as I logged in, and she confirmed the receipt of my email. And then I received a phone call from Mrs. Rivera later that day, notifying that she would deny all my leave requests for both annual leave or leave without pay, and that she would charge me AWOL instead. I knew the AWOL term. I knew that it wasn't good at all, and I asked Mrs. Rivera whether she would reconsider her decision. And on July 21st, on Tuesday, the next day, when I got to work, Mr. Martin became my supervisor. So there was a change in supervisors from Mrs. Rivera to Mr. Martin. However, the spreadsheet that we were using for the funding team was still under Mrs. Rivera's name. And based on what we were told by our by our team lead, we're told that Mrs. Rivera will remain a supervisor of the funding in the larger funding group, and she will remain some sort of supervisor, some type of staff supervisor, something like that. But then Mr. Martin will be the supervisor for our team. What I understood to me was that I will, going forward, I will have to request submit leave request to Mr. Martin. So in July 21st, on Tuesday, July 21st, I called Mr. Martin to explain the reasons for each leave request and to try to understand why I was being charged with error. And Mr. Martin told me that I should have requested the leave ahead of time, and he asked me to discuss them further with Mrs. Rivera. In the background, I was hearing, as I believe Mrs. Rivera speaking on the phone. I believe she was in training with another team. So he recommended I talk to her afterwards, after she will be done with the training. So around noon, I sent them both an email requesting that they reconsider the old determinations and providing further explanations and documentation. Later that afternoon, Mrs. Rivera and Mr. Martin called me on MS Teams and informed me that they will be denying my appeal on the error charges and that they requested and I requested a permission to pursue the appeal process with other people in the management chain of command, and they provided me with the names of their superiors. So I went ahead later that same day and sent an email to Mr. Shine, Mr. Goodson, and the two other managers in the office, in the PDC office. And later that evening, because I believe that it was extraordinary, I was surprised by those decisions. I believe that they were motivated by something else. Because of that entry, because I have been already on the other entry team for weeks, I thought that it wasn't normal. I felt that I was being discriminated against, so I contacted the OA office to see what. I started to look for the ALC contact information so that I could obtain their assistance. On July 22nd, that's when I actually obtained that information and sent my first email to the EA office. I remained, eventually, all my appeals got denied by management. And I also did appeal, sent an email to Mrs. Julie Brill. She's the head of HR, I believe, at the DC headquarters. I asked her to come to see if she could do anything about it, and she just told me that was told that there were other avenues of redress available to me. So by that time, I had already sent an email to the EEO office, and so eventually they told me how to start the process, and I waited to see what senior management at the PC office would provide, and after all my requests were denied, all my appeals requests were denied, then I moved forward with the EEO part. And during that time, I was still on the entry team. Eventually, when the EEO office contacted me to study, to do a counseling session, to complete a counseling session. That happened on August 10th, and they told me later on that they also contacted Mrs. Rivera that same day, and after that interview on August 10th with the EEO counselor, on August 11th, when I got to work, I was told that I was being moved from the data entry team, and not just me, but a bunch of people. Basically, we were told that the data entry project had ended effective immediately, and we were told to wait for further instructions. So we had a blank day where I had to perform more trainings and read a little bit of my SOP and do other things that I usually do during those times. And on August 12th, we received a new assignment. So we remained in the larger I remained on the larger funding team, and then I was assigned I transferred from Mrs. Hero Holloway's leadership to I forgot her name, but basically I remained under the leadership of Mr. Martin, and the task basically was a little bit, it was comparable to what we were doing before. So when I say before, I mean before the data entry team. So we were basically still contacting applicants, but specifically for information relating to finances and things like that. And when after we were assigned to that new team, that was on Wednesday, August 12th, training lasted maybe a day or two, and then we received notification that there was an IRS form that we had to request from the applicants, so that IRS form, when I went to the IRS website, it had two. There were two versions available. The most recent versions that I saw, and the most recent version had. The IRS website specifically stated that it offered the people using the form to have their P2 information protected, especially if the form will be sent by email, some other means that could be intercepted. So I thought that it was relevant because we had been told to use the previous versions that did not offer that protection, and because of all the security issues that we had at the SBA, because at some point in time, for example, we had received emails, phishing emails, and we had been told by IT to quickly delete those emails, and so we had contact with IT quite regularly because of IT issues at the SBA. So I thought that it was something that that was pertinent. So I reached out to my team lead, Jessica McCall, and when I reached out to her, I told her about both versions of the form, and I asked her why we were not using the most recent one. And she told me, I guess she wasn't aware of that most recent version, and I sent her some information from the IRS website and everything, so that she would understand what I was talking about and why it was important, because she was also at an attorney. And she took some time. She told me that she will reach out to management, and later on that day, she told me that she had gotten some answers, and that she was told that we had to continue using requesting the form that we had been told first to request. And she sent me some emails from management stating so. So when I got that email, I did not feel comfortable doing that. Earlier that day, I had requested. I had explained the issue to the applicants. I applicant and told him that told him about the two versions of the form. I believe the form was 45 or 60, and I told him that I explained to him the risk with cybersecurity and everything, and I explained to him the risk, and I told him about the possible delay if you use one form versus another one, so that he could make an informed decision on how he wanted his file handled. But when I received the email from Mrs. McCall, because I had told her that I had notified, that I had given both options to the applicant, she told me that in her response, telling me to use the form, the older version of the form, she also told me to correct that information with the applicant, which I regretfully did, but I did not feel comfortable doing that, and I did not want to keep doing that. We were only a few days into. I was only a few days I was only a few days into this assignment with a new team and everything, and based on my history, the fact that I was charged, I was charged AWOL for being 5 minutes late, and I had gone on AWOL for talking to other SBA people and things like that, and from the trauma that I endured from being on the data entry team for so long. I just didn't see an issue. I mean, if I refused to continue doing that, then I could, But the next day when I went to work, I said, well, do I need to stay there? And if I continue following the orders that have been given by management, that would go against the law. That would go against my ethical standards as an attorney. I knew that it wasn't right. Also, and so I was wondering whether I should just stay quiet and do what I was being told to do, or any type of protest I thought would be met with a huge backlash, and I didn't want to be transferred to another data entry team because I was an attorney, and so I decided based on everything that had happened, based on the events of the last couple of days, I decided that there really wasn't a place for me there at the PDC office, and so I resigned. And I sent an email to resign, and I notified my team lead. I notified my supervisor, Mr. Martin, and I notified an HR representative. And in that email, I also requested a copy of my commitment plan, which is also my commitment rating, my performance rating, I should say. And so I did that because because I wanted to have peace of mind to know that even when I was leaving the agency, that I was still scored, fairly, and that I didn't have anything negative in my commitment, in my performance reviews. And after I sent that email, I sent it on a Saturday. On Monday, I received. I had also requested a copy of my SF50, and then on Monday I received that SF50, but I did not receive anything else from HR. And I, for the year that for the next year or so, I sent multiple emails to Mr. Martin and to some HR people at the PDC. That's the copy of my commitment plan. And I also called Mr. Martin a few times until I just called, but I never got an email response. I never got a phone call from Mr. Martin. And every time I would talk to an HR person, they would tell me that it was Mr. Martin, who was my last supervisor, who was responsible for providing me with my commitment plan, which I women commitment waiting, but that's the same language that I used the first time around in 2018. And I received one. The first time around when I left the SBA in 2018, I received one the same day. Actually, that day, my old supervisor, Mr. Raymond, I forgot his last name. I believe it's Brown. He was he was only my supervisor for maybe a day or two, but then he still provided me with a copy of my rating. He rated my work, and I had that document within, I want to say, an hour after I submitted the resignation letter. He felt that. I'm sorry, I wanted to correct that. We filled that application, that commitment waiting, and he signed it. I believe I signed it too. And then later on, I requested a copy from HR, and they provided me a copy. So I thought that it would be the same thing this time around, but I never heard back from Mr. Martin. And because I had started the EO process, and because of everything that had happened, I was worried about what could be in that. My file, and also because even though I was leaving the SBA, I still intended to seek work in the federal government. So I was worried about how anything negative that could be in my portfolio, that could be in my HR documents, could impact me. I was worried about the errors, and I was worried about my commitment, whatever was my commitment plan or performance rating document. So I kept calling and kept emailing. Eventually, in August 2021, I reached out to the HR, to Mr. Ledford in headquarters. I reached out to Mrs. Brill again, Julie Brill, in headquarters. And Mrs. Brill sent my email to Mr. Ledford, who is the head of personnel, ODA personnel, and Mr. Ledford, it took me maybe about 2 days. He started working on that day as soon as I told him. He told me within a few hours that he was in contact with the PDT office to try. At first, he actually, I'm sorry, let me correct that. At first, he told me that his office went into the system and there wasn't a commitment plan. He didn't see a commitment waiting for me, a performance waiting for me in the online system. So he told me that probably my supervisor had filled out a hard copy. So he reached out to my supervisor, to the PDC. He reached out to the PDC office, and it took about 2 days before I received an answer, and I was told that there wasn't. At first, he sent me a blank copy of my performance plan that I had signed months before I left, maybe 3 months after I started working at the PDC office. But it was blank. And he sent me that, and I told him that I had worked at the SBA for about 5 months in 2020, and that I believe that there was a rating for me somewhere, and I wanted a copy of that performance rating document. And so he told me that he would do some more digging, and then later on he told me that it seemed that there wasn't any for me available. So that ended about a year of me wondering what was going on and agonizing about the whole thing. But also at the same time, I became suspicious of that answer because I knew that around the time that I was sent to the data entry team, And around the time that I received a notice for that I was being considered for promotion from the GS09 to GS11 grade level, we had been told that we had had a conference call. Many of us in the accounts department were invited in large groups to a conference call with some supervisors, and we were told that there will be some people that will be promoted because they needed more team leads to handle the large teams that they were having. And so and they also told us that to be a team lead, you had to be GS11, at least, I believe that's what I said, at least. So some people early on. So I received a promotion, and around that same time, some other people that I had trained with in my hiring class were promoted to the team lead status. So I believed when Mr. Ledford told me that there wasn't any performance for me, that something off was going on, because I believe that in order for somebody to be promoted, for example, to a team lead status, their performance had to be evaluated, and because for at least one of those people, we had been on several teams before during the time when I was working at the SBA in 2020. I believe that they had received a rating. Their work performance had to have been evaluated, and I was wondering why mine wasn't. Why at that time I received a performance plan instead of a performance rating, and why even when I left, still didn't get a performance rating. And more alarming, my last supervisor refused to respond to any attempt to communicate, or even goes through the HR department to tell me the status of my performance rating. So those are the reasons that I started I went on and filed for the EEO complaint later in September, and then about in July or August 2021, I became aware of the OS, the Office of Special Counsel, and I contacted them to file some complaints, to find some disclosures, and eventually my complaint reached the board. The agency submitted in their file some documents showing that I completed I completed some EO and whistleblower training at some point during my tenure at the agency, but I would like to point out that I remember completing some AEO training on that. I mean, the video was mostly about sexual harassment, but as far as the personnel, the prohibited personnel, the PPP or the PPO issues or whistleblowing issues, I do not remember completing that training. It might have been just that one day when I was bored, I clicked on that training and I completed it and never gave it a second thought, because those are the types of things that I never thought I would face. Those are the things that you always think happen to. So that's why we're here today, and so this process, my hope has been to obtain some justice from the agency for putting me through a whole lot of hell and while I was working for them and afterwards, and also to hopefully have some changes made at the SBA or at the PDC office, so that people in my situation, or people that will fit my profile, or people that will be whistleblower in the future, will find it easier to do so, to blow the whistle, but also easier to obtain the protection that they need to have from the agency itself. So that's why I introduced this case. And right now, I'm going to stop talking because I feel like I've talked for a long time.
Okay, so Ms. Kouemo, does that conclude your direct testimony?
Well, I think yes, it does. It does.
Okay, all right, then we'll turn it over to the agency for cross-examination. Mr. Howell, is that you?
Yes, ma'am, it is. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
All right, and unfortunately, there is some renovation going on in my building. I've done my best to basically mute the background noise, but if you hear it, do let me know. I'll do what I can to resolve it. Good morning, Ms. Kouemo.
Hello, Mr. Howell.
So in your direct testimony, I believe that you just testified that, I believe at one point you testified that you didn't have any whistleblower training during your initial onboarding. Isn't that right?
Yes, as I believe so. I did not have any whistleblower training during the few days of the onboarding process.
Okay, then you also just testified, I believe, that you, to the extent the agency had presented any evidence that you had completed it, you don't remember. Is that right?
Well, actually, yes, that's what I'm saying. I see that the agency.
Is it right that you don't? That you're saying you don't remember it? Yes or no?
I'm going to say that the sheet that the agency provided with the contact information, it looks familiar, but I don't remember actually the actual training. That's what I want to say.
All right, let's look at that document. It's going to be, and I have it marked here. Bear with me just a moment. It's going to be tab 33, and it's going to be pages 71 and 72 of board tab 33. Do you have that tab in front of you?
Just a moment, please. Let me double check. Sorry, just a moment. I'm going to pull it up. I thought I had it open, but it looks like I do not. Okay, it's open. What page, please?
72.
Yes.
Okay. This says, does it not, a transcript report for Sylviane Kouemo?
It does.
Okay. If we go down, highlighted, it says prohibited personnel practices - whistleblower training, and it's actually highlighted. Do you see that?
Yes.
And it says that you were actually registered for it on 4/16/2020. Isn't that correct?
It does.
And it says you completed it on 6/19/2020. Isn't that also true?
Yes.
And it shows you having a score of 100%. Is that also correct?
Yes.
So it's true then that you had whistleblower training while you were at SBA. Isn't that also correct?
Yes, it is correct. Based on this document, it is correct.
Well, that seems to be a discrepancy we're getting into. You say based on this document. So is this document, in your view, a lie?
No, I'm just saying I do not remember not complaining that training, but I did say though that you had another document that showed the list of contact information, I believe, with the PPP, with the OSC, I believe, and that document looks familiar, but like I said, I just don't remember copying it. So that's why I say that based on this document, it looks like it's correct.
Ma'am, I'm talking about this document, and I would appreciate as we go forward if you would respond to the questions I ask. Do you have any reason to suspect that this document is not authentic?
No.
Very well. It's true, isn't it, that you're currently in Cameroon?
I am, yes.
That's where you're from originally, I believe?
Yes.
It's also true, isn't it, that you're no longer seeking work as an attorney, isn't that right?
That is true.
And it's true that you're actually now trying to start an NGO?
Yes, and that's what I said in my deposition.
And it's also true, isn't it, that you've placed your bar license on inactive status?
Yes.
And isn't it correct that you currently have no source of income?
No, I'm not getting paid at this time for any work because I'm trying to start a nonprofit.
So it's true then that you have no source of income, isn't that correct?
I don't have any sort of income for work performed, but I'm going to say that my family helps me a little bit from here and there. So if that's not a source of income, then I don't have a source of income.
Very well. So I believe you testified that on your second stint at the SBA, you worked in the Office of Disaster Assistance. Did I hear that right?
Yes.
In the processing,
first and second.
In the Processing and Disbursement Center?
Yes.
So in fact, during that second stint, you moved around on several different teams. Isn't that right?
I did, yes.
And you understood, didn't you, during your second stint, this is 2020, that you were in fact a temporary employee, didn't you?
I understood that I was a contractual employee, and I was hired for the COVID-19 pandemic. So as far as I understood it, as long as the COVID-19 pandemic was going on, I was still employed, at least during that time.
So then you understood you weren't permanent. Is that fair?
Yes.
It's correct too, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay. Let's actually look at board tab 23, and the pages are going to be 149 to 151. Please tell me when you're there.
What page, please?
150 and 151.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Now, it's not a practice of yours, is it, to sign documents you don't read? Is that right?
No.
Okay. Looking at page 150 at the bottom, is that your signature?
It is.
And it's signed 4/7/2020, isn't that right?
Yes.
Going up, do you see in bold it says temporary?
Yes.
There's an X next to it, isn't there?
Yes.
And those are your initials, SMK?
Yes.
So then you understood you were a temporary employee based on this document that you signed, right?
Yes.
Okay. We go down to the second page of this. So this is page 151 of board tab 23. There is a section called General Office Rules. Do you see what I'm talking about?
Yes.
All right. Is that are those your initials next to it?
Yes.
And that paragraph says you agreed to abide by office rules. Isn't that right?
Yes.
And didn't office rules include coming to work on time?
Oh, those are office rules. I think everywhere I've worked, include coming to work on time. So yes. So
then you acknowledge that part of the office rules you signed were that you would come into work on time at the SBA, yes?
Yes.
Very well, thank you. And no one told you at this time that you had an expectation of permanent or continued employment, did they?
Well, as far as I believed it, as far as I knew it, it was common knowledge that some employees could get callback whenever there was a disaster. Some could get a preference when they were called back, and some could be retained. So some people who stay at the agency were even in low times to wait for the next disaster. So the hope was to stay as long as possible.
And I appreciate what your hope might have been. My question was, no one in management told you specifically that you had an expectation of permanent or continued employment. Isn't that right?
No one in management told me that.
Very well. Now, I believe you testified that when you were initially hired into PDC, you were hired into the accounts department. Is that right?
Yes.
And then you later got detailed to the loan processing department, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and there you worked on what were known as idle loans. Isn't that right?
It is right.
And for the record, tell us what idle loans stand for. Not what, you don't have to explain them, what do they stand for?
Economic injury disaster loans.
Thank you. And so I believe you testified that you would recommend whether a loan should be approved or denied. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
But you didn't have final authority as to whether it would be approved or denied.
I did not, but if there was an issue, usually the file would get kicked back so that we could adjust our work at the first level, at the first review level.
In other words, you did not have final authority.
No, I did not.
Okay, and then I believe you testified that the SBA transferred you back to the accounts department sometime in about June of 2020. Isn't that right?
Yes, it is right.
So then all it did, isn't it, is that the agency moved you back to where you'd originally been hired into, right?
Yes.
Okay. So I believe you testified earlier, you contend that the first disclosure, protected disclosure you made was one to Letitia Parham. Is that correct?
With Letitia Parham and then with the applicants.
Okay, we'll get to that. But to Letitia Parham.
Yes.
It's right that Letitia Parham was just a team lead, correct?
She was a team lead, but she was a first point of contact with management. So basically, whenever we had any question, whenever we had any issue, we were told to respect the chain of command. So the team lead would be the first of all, pretty much.
I see. So, in fact, if the chain of command is it your testimony that the chain of command gave Letitia Parham a command and she forwarded it on to you, it had to be followed? Is that also correct?
Meaning that our supervisors gave her, told her, yes, what to say, and then she would tell us what to do, what to say. But then on some issues, she knew what was going on in management, so she would give us the answer without even having to check it with management.
Well, then it would necessarily be correct that if Letitia Parham conveyed a message from management, that could be considered management speaking itself. Is that right?
I suppose so.
Okay. But she wasn't actually a supervisor, was she?
She was a team lead.
Okay, so she couldn't approve leave, isn't that true?
No, she could not approve leave.
And she didn't write performance reviews either, did she?
Not, I mean, I don't know what the performance reviews, but I think the supervisors did.
So she did not do it, is that right?
That I will have to, I don't know about, I believe I saw information and I never got those documents from the agency.
Okay. So I believe you testified earlier that it's your contention that under previous regulations for idle loans, a business had to have at least 51% of its ownership either owned by citizens or permanent residents. Isn't that right?
Citizens, permanent residents, and I think there were a few other immigration statuses that qualified.
Fair enough. Okay. So you allege that the disclosure you made to Ms. Parham came after you had worked on a business that was owned by a father and son. Isn't that right?
Yes.
And it's your testimony, isn't that the son either was a citizen or an eligible immigrant?
Yes, one of them was, and I believe that was the son.
But the father wasn't?
Yes, I believe so.
It's true, isn't it, though, that you don't even know the name of that business, right?
No, I do not recall the name, but I could have my memory, how would I say that? If I saw, for example, a list of loan files, I could recognize some names could be familiar. And then even though I do not remember the exact name of the business, I remember that the applicants themselves had some type of East African worded names, which are very, very distinct. So that will help also. And then I remember that they were located in a court state, which I believe will probably be somewhere north or northeast. And then I also remember that the business was they identified the type of business that they had as being a tobacco shop or tobacco store, if I remember correctly.
Okay, so thank you for all of that. And my question was, you don't know the name of the business as you sit here today. Isn't that correct?
That is correct. But I can always remember.
Ma'am, isn't it correct that you don't know the name of the business as you sit here today?
That is correct. Mm-hmm.
And it's also correct that you can't name either of the applicants, either the father or the son. Isn't that true?
I don't know. I don't remember the last names.
So it's correct you can't name them. Isn't that true?
That is true.
Okay. It's also right that you don't know the date of this alleged disclosure either, do you?
I do not remember the exact date of the disclosure, but I believe that it might have been later in the week, Thursday or Friday. And then because I believe that when the one of the applicants contacted me again, it was about a week later, so also towards the end of the week. But I'm not 100% sure that that's the exact day. And then I don't remember the day of the month, for example, that it was.
So it's your testimony, though, isn't it, that you made a protected disclosure about these individuals and this business. Isn't that true?
It is.
It's also true, though, that you can't remember their names or when you talked to them.
She's answered that already, Mr. Howell.
Very well. So, Ms. Kouemo, if I understand you correctly, you contend that at first you had recommended denying a loan to that company because it didn't meet the 51% threshold, correct?
Yes.
And then I believe you've testified that you made the disclosure about this company after the rules changed to 50% of a company needing to be owned by eligible ownership, right?
Yes.
It's true, isn't it, though, that nobody at the agency directed you that the rule change was supposed to be retroactive?
No. However, because the rule changed, I believe that at that time, they qualified because they met the new threshold. So I believe that if they had waited to apply, instead of applying before the rule, if they had applied at that time, they would have gotten the loan approved. So it wasn't a matter of me thinking that it was retroactive. It was a matter of me thinking that, they got denied, so they would go home and sit there and be sad about it without knowing that based on the new rules or the new changes, they were qualified. So basically, that's why I made this order.
Your Honor, I'm going to move to strike that answer as non-responsive to the question that I posed.
Ms. Kouemo, if you could just listen carefully to what Mr. Howell's specific question is and answer that question. If you later feel like there's additional testimony you would need to provide to add clarity around the circumstances, when we come back to you on redirect, you'll have an opportunity to provide that greater clarity. But on cross-examination, just focus specifically on his question and then answer that direct question, okay?
Okay, thank you, Judge.
Okay, thank you. All right, Mr. Howell, if you want to
Thank you very much. So, ma'am, just to clarify, it's true, isn't it, that nobody at the agency directed you that the rule change would be retroactive?
True.
Okay. So you also allege, don't you, that you asked Ms. Parham if the agency would notify previously denied applicants of this change. Isn't that right?
I'm sorry, would you repeat the question?
Don't you allege that you asked Ms. Parham if the agency was going to take the step of notifying these previously denied applicants?
I did.
Okay. But you don't know exactly when you did that, do you?
I did that the same day that she told us about the rule change. I mean, the same day that I received the notification about the rule change. So.
Okay. I believe you testified, too, that you thought the agency's actions in not notifying these individuals somehow violated a standard operating procedure or an SOP, right?
Would you repeat that question again, please?
I think you testified that you believed that the agency's actions violated a standard operating procedure, also known as an SOP.
Yes, I believe that. Yes. I mean, okay. I don't know if you want me to elaborate.
But you can't name what that SOP is as you sit here today, can you?
I can say that the rules on reconsideration should apply because reconsideration is basically a review of the eligibility. For files that were denied, a review of whether the files were denied wrongfully or rightfully. So that part applies. And also when the applicants reapplied, at that time they qualified, so they should have gotten the loans. The notification approved. So by denying them the second time based on the previous denial, so that was a violation of the SOP. Also,
and that SOP is what SOP?
The SOP for ODA loans, which I submitted into evidence.
Okay. So, do you contend that the agency's actions as related to the EIDL loan changes somehow violated a law?
Not the changes themselves, but...
And the action of not notifying the applicants then?
I'm not... Yes, several actions. Not notifying the applicants of the rule change, but also denying qualifying applicants under the denying applicants that will qualify a second time based on the previous denial when they should actually when they were eligible.
What law? But you don't know what law it is that you allege that it violated, do you?
I believe that I stated those laws in my brief.
Okay, but as you sit here today, do you know what they are?
There are financial fair lending laws.
One of them, I believe that you alleged that it violated was somehow the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, right?
Yes.
But you're not able to describe how it violated that act, are you?
I'm sorry. I'm not able. I did describe it in my brief.
I appreciate that you might have described it in your brief. Are you able to describe it as you sit here today without reading your brief?
I don't see why me describing it without reading my brief would be.
Okay. Then the record will reflect that you refuse to answer the question. That's fine.
No, I'm sorry. Would you repeat the question? I will answer it.
You've already answered it.
It's not Mr. Howell, we're not arguing with the witness, so I don't need you to characterize her testimony or the implications of her testimony. You can just move on to the next question.
Very well, Your Honor. Didn't you testify, Ms. Kouemo, that Ms. Parham said that when you asked her if the agency would contact these applicants, that she told you shouldn't do it?
Yes, she told me that.
But you can't really remember what she said to you, can she? Other than that she told you not to do it?
She told me that I shouldn't do it. First, regarding the contact the applicants themselves that those files I had worked on, she told me that you open a kind of form. She used an expression that was similar to that one.
Okay. But you went ahead and contacted the applicant anyway, didn't you?
Yes.
Because you thought that was your duty?
Because I thought, yes, that was my duty as an attorney and as somebody that wanted to follow the law and do the right thing.
Even though Ms. Parham had, you said, had told you not to do it?
Yes.
And even though I believe you stated earlier that directives that came from Ms. Parham could be considered to have come from management, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I know you've testified that you made the disclosure to Ms. Parham. You didn't make that disclosure to anyone else in management, did you?
Not directly, but I knew that by leaving, I don't know if I should elaborate. Maybe I should stop there and just elaborate when I do my...
I'll leave that up to you. I believe your answer was not directly?
Yes, not directly.
So then you don't have any evidence, do you, that Ms. Parham ever told anyone else about your disclosures, right?
I do not currently.
Okay. I believe you also testified that you somehow made disclosures to the applicants themselves, right?
Yes.
But they weren't members of the agency, were they?
No.
And so they didn't work at the agency?
No.
Okay. So I believe that you've testified that you alleged that the agency retaliated when Ms. Rivera contacted you during your sick leave in June of 2020, correct?
Yes.
All right, let's go to board tab 23, and I'm going to be looking at pages 162 to 165. Please let me know when you have that up.
$60.
162 to 165, please, ma'am.
Okay.
Okay. So I'd like you to go to the bottom of 164, top of 165. Please let me know when you're there.
Yes, I'm there.
Right. This is an email from you to Scott Montgomery, isn't that right?
It is.
Okay, and you told him you'd be out on June 22nd of 2020?
Yes.
He acknowledged it, didn't he?
He did.
And he never denied you were sick, did he?
No, he did not.
Okay, if we go up a bit on 164. This is June 23rd. You once again told Mr. Montgomery you'd be out sick again, right?
Yes.
And he acknowledged it again, didn't he?
He did.
And he didn't deny that you were sick?
No, he did not.
Okay, as we go up, ma'am, this is your June 24th, 2020 email. You once again told him you'd be out sick on June 24th, 2020.
Yes.
And this time, he told you that you'd have to get a return to work authorization from your doctor, correct?
Yes, he did.
He said that was per Ms. Rivera, or per her directive, I believe?
Yes, he did.
He still didn't deny you were sick, though, did he?
No, he did not.
He even wished you well in this email, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
Okay, as we go up through this email towards the top, no one tells you a specific time to call Erica Rivera, do they?
No.
In fact, at the top, Ms. Rivera says, when you have a moment, right?
Yes.
Okay. And ultimately, when you talked to her, I believe you testified that she asked you some questions about whether or not you had experienced COVID symptoms. Is that right?
Yes, she did.
So this was June 2020. That was in the midst of the COVID pandemic, wasn't it?
It was.
Ms. Rivera was your supervisor at the time, correct?
It was.
So Ms. Rivera then had a legitimate interest in understanding when and if you would be at work, didn't she?
I want to say yes, but can I have a but?
Ma'am, I can't control how you answer questions.
Okay. I'm going to say yes, but yeah, I'm going to say yes and then leave the but for my...
Perfectly fine. Okay, so I believe that you've alleged that this violated a regulation about contacting employees during sick leave.
Yes.
All right, let's go to board tab 9, please, which was one of the ones that you asked me to have all the witnesses have available. And I'm going to pages 15 and 16 of board tab 9. Please let me know when you're there.
What page number, please?
It'll be the bottom of page 15, the top of page 16. That's not what's marked. It's what the board marks it as 15 and 16. It's also 15 and 16 of the document.
Yes.
Okay. And it starts according to CFR 2009 Title 5. You see what I'm talking about?
Yes.
All right, and in the italics below it, that's the regulation that you cite that it violated, correct?
Yes.
Okay. If I'm looking at the it says an agency may consider an employee's self-certification as to the reason for his or her absence as administratively acceptable evidence, regardless of the duration of the absence. An agency may also require a medical certificate or other administratively acceptable evidence as to the reason for an absence for any of the purposes described in 6030.401A for an absence in excess of 3 days or for a lesser period when the agency determines it necessary. Did I read that right?
Yes.
And those are your words, correct?
Those are the words of the...
Those are the words that you quoted.
Yes.
In your brief that you submitted to this board, right?
Yes.
Okay, so it says then in that regulation, doesn't it, that an agency may rely on self-certification?
Yes.
It doesn't say it has to, correct?
No.
And it also says an agency may contact you and ask you for certification, even if it's for a period less than 3 days, doesn't it?
Yes.
Okay. So you acknowledge, or would you agree that during the time in question, this is June 2020, the Office of Disaster Assistance was very busy?
Yes.
Okay. In fact, during that time, you were having to work mandatory 10-hour days, weren't you?
Yes.
In fact, 10-hour days and 6 days a week, correct?
Yes.
So that was actually mandatory overtime, wasn't it?
Yes.
It's also true, isn't it, that whenever you took leave, you couldn't work mandatory overtime for the day that you took any period of leave, right?
Yes.
Okay. So during the period that you were out for your illness, it's correct that someone else would need to cover your duties while you were gone, right?
I'm not sure. I mean, work had to, I suppose people had to work. But as far as covering my own duties, I don't know. I don't know how management
would agree that the work had to continue even though you were absent.
Yes.
Okay. So you allege then that Ms. Rivera's contact of you was retaliation for your idle loan disclosures, right? And what I mean, your disclosures about changes to idle loan requirements.
Yes and no. What I'm saying is, if I can answer that question more clearly, is that the repeated contacts is what I said violated procedures and also guidelines from the CFR. Because after I had told my team lead the first time that I was sick, and then Mrs. Rivera, through my team lead, requested the doctor's note. I don't see any need for any further communication while I'm at the emergency room.
Okay, and so my question was, you allege, though, that Ms. Rivera contacted you or repeatedly contacted you as retaliation for your disclosures, right?
Yes.
But you don't have any evidence that she actually knew of the disclosures, do you?
I don't have any direct evidence, but I tried to obtain the evidence during discovery and I wasn't able to get it. However, I have circumstantial evidence based on the fact that because she was my supervisor, she had access to my emails and my MS Teams communications, including the ones I had, including the exchanges that I had done in the past with Mrs. Barron or with the loan applicants.
Okay, so you allege then that she had access to it if she wanted to, right?
She had access to that information, and I believe that it was part of her duties to review my work, which included communications. So it wasn't just that she had access to that if she wanted to, but she just had access to it.
And you know that she had to review it how?
Because I believe that as a supervisor, in my performance plan, in my duties as my performance plan as an attorney, communications are one of the reasons, one of the topics of review, of managerial review. So they had to review oral and written communications with applicants and with each other.
So you believe that, but you don't know that. Is that correct?
No, it's in my performance plan. It's in the plan that I signed. It's in the plan that I also used in 2017 and 2018 when I was working.
So at the time when you took sick leave, Ms. Parham wasn't your team lead anymore, correct?
No.
Okay. And did I hear you testify correct that you believe being pulled back to accounts and later assigned to the data entry task, that was also retaliation?
Would you repeat that question? I believe the first part of it, I missed it.
Yes, ma'am. I'll try to go a little slower this time. Did I hear you right that you allege that you're being pulled back to the accounts department and being assigned to a data entry task, that those were retaliation?
No, you did not hear me right.
Okay. What did I hear incorrectly?
I did not say that me coming back to the accounts department was retaliatory. What I say that me being assigned to the data entry team and me being kept there as an attorney for 5 weeks, that was retaliatory.
Okay, so it's only the being assigned to data entry that you allege to be retaliation.
Sorry about that. Based on the second part of your question, yes.
Okay, but I believe you also testified that a number of people got put on to that data entry task, right?
Yes.
In fact, at least a dozen, right?
Yes.
Okay, and you weren't the only attorney that got put on that data entry project, were you?
No, I was not.
Okay. And I believe that was called, that data entry project, it was funding triage?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to ask you to go back to board tab 9, and I'm going to go to page 17. Let me know when you're there, please.
Yes.
You see the paragraph, second one on the page, it starts with however.
Yes.
You say, however, when I was sent to the data entry team, it became quite obvious that the transfer was unfair, to say the least. I still had access to the funding MS Teams page, although Ms. Rivera had forbidden us to interact with the rest of the team. So I could clearly see that there were more interesting or less boring work available, as the larger funding group was still operational. To add insult to injury, newer people had been added to that team, most of whom were loan specialists and paralegals who had to be trained on the task at hand. Did I read those words correctly?
Yes.
So it's correct then that at this time, when you're on the data entry team, you simply thought that you deserved more interesting work, right?
No, it's not just what I thought. It was what I was hired for.
Hired based... when you say that's what you were hired for, that means what?
That means that the job posting that I answered to did not indicate that I would be doing that for 5 weeks.
And that's because you thought the work was beneath you, isn't that right?
No, it wasn't that I thought that it was beneath me personally, but I believe that it was beneath any attorney that was hired to work as an attorney.
Okay, and I believe you testified that you, during this time, you had a lot of downtime to read SOPs, correct?
During the 2020 pandemic, during my time at the agency for 2020 pandemic, yes, there were often gaps in between assignments, sometimes lasting as long as a week. And so I occupied that time by doing other things like reading the SOP, reading the newsletter, completing training that I was interested in, and things like that.
But you've also testified that the ODA was very busy during that time, right?
Yes, when we had assignments, we were busy, but then there were gaps when we didn't have assignments and we didn't have access to, we didn't have permission or access to any database where we could perform work. So we had our emails, and then, that's pretty much it.
As you sit here today, though, you're not able, are you, to name a rule that requires work to be personally interesting, right?
I'm sorry.
As you sit here today, can you name a rule that requires that work has to be personally interesting to you?
Personally interesting to me?
Yes, ma'am.
No, but I know that when you're hired and your job description says something, your assignment needs to match that job description or be closely related to it. Okay.
So I believe that you have also testified and alleged in this case that the agency retaliated against you by charging you as AWOL. Am I right about that?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. And so you acknowledge, don't you, ma'am, that there was a rule at that time requiring that leave had to be pre-approved by ODA, or Office of Disaster Assistance?
The rules that I knew of were that whenever possible, annual leave needed to be requested in advance when you knew in advance that you'll be out of the office. But for cases of emergency or for cases that were not, that you couldn't have known before, then you could still request annual leave after the fact and it will be granted.
Okay, that's fair enough. Let's please go to back to board tab 33, and I'm going to be looking at pages 16 to 21. Please let me know when you're there.
I'm there.
Okay, I'd like you to go specifically to page 21.
Okay.
Are you there?
Yes.
Okay, so on page 21, this is an email from you to Carol Holloway, correct?
I'm sorry. Did you say 23, 23?
21, board tab 33, page 21.
33. I'm sorry, yes. I wasn't.
Board tab 33, page 21.
Okay, I'm there.
All right. That's an email from you to Carol Holloway, correct?
Yes.
And she was your team lead at the time, is that right?
Yes.
And you told her that you came back late from lunch, didn't you?
Yes.
And it's true, isn't it, that you didn't have pre-approval for that, for not being in the office during that time?
It is true.
And she told you that you would need to have a leave slip, didn't she?
Yes.
Okay, she also reminded you that you wouldn't be able to work the mandatory overtime, isn't that right?
Yes.
Okay. And so you don't deny being late that time, correct?
No.
Okay. I'd ask you, please, to look back at board tab 9, which is your jurisdictional brief. And this time I'm looking at page 22 of it.
Okay.
22. So as I'm looking at this top paragraph, you discussed that you spent almost an hour talking to a colleague about matters that weren't directly related to your duties, right?
I spent 15 minutes, the first 15 minutes roughly, talking about matters that were directly related to my duties, because we were talking about reconsideration of EIDL loans. And I have been working on EIDL loans, and you had been advised to recommend reconsideration to some applicants. So that was directly related to my duties, but then the rest of the call was SBA matters that were not directly related to my specific duties at the time.
And that was almost an hour, that rest of the time, correct?
That was almost 45 minutes.
Okay. So you admit, correct, that you didn't pre-request leave for that period of time?
No, I did not.
Okay. I'd like now to go back to board tab 33, and I'm going to be looking at pages 22 to 24. And really pages 23 and 24 is what I'm going to be looking at.
Could you repeat the tab number, please, Mr. Howell?
Yes, ma'am. Board tab 33. Are you there, Ms. Kouemo?
Yes, what page number, please?
It'll be 22 and 23 of board tab 23. I mean, 33, excuse me, board tab 33. There I go.
When 22 is exhibit 2.
Yes, so go down to page 23 and 24. My apologies. Do you have that up now?
Yes.
All right, so at the bottom of 23 and top of 24, that's another email from you to Ms. Holloway on July 17th, 2020, correct?
Yes.
And you told her that you'd be into the office late today due to a personal emergency, isn't that correct?
Yes.
In fact, that day you were about 2 hours late, weren't you?
Yes.
And the personal emergency was that you were applying for a new job, isn't that right?
It is why.
Okay. You never revealed that reason, though, to anyone at the agency, did you?
No.
Indeed, earlier today, when you were testifying, you also didn't mention it, isn't that right?
No, I did not.
Okay. Staying on board tab 33, I'm going to be looking at pages 26 through 28. You may have to zoom in on those. Those pages are a little small. The text is a bit small. But are you there?
Sorry, would you repeat the page number?
Yes, ma'am. 26 to 28.
Yes.
Okay, the bottom of page 27. Ms. Rivera asked you which supervisor approved these requests, didn't she?
Yes.
And then you told her no one had pre-approved them, correct?
Yes.
And if we go up, she then asked you for an explanation of the various times, right? The times that you were absent. And if we go up, you provided one, didn't you?
Yes.
And you understood, didn't you, that Ms. Rivera expected a truthful explanation?
Yes, and I provided one.
Okay, so when we look at your response, though, you don't explain what the personal emergency is to her, do you?
No, but I believe that was sufficient information.
Okay, but my question was, you don't say that it was for completing a job application.
No, I did not.
Okay. Indeed, later on, you spoke to Erica Rivera and Chris Martin on the phone about the AWOL determination. Isn't that right?
Yes.
And you recorded that conversation, didn't you?
I did.
And you didn't tell either one of them that you were recording them, did you?
I did not.
And you didn't obtain permission from either of them to record them either, did you?
No.
Nonetheless, on that call, isn't it right that they told you that it was management's decision to determine whether the leave instances were AWOL?
They did.
And they also told you how to appeal it, didn't they?
I requested the information about the appeal, who to appeal to, and they provided the names of the management, of the managers to me.
Okay. And you had another call with Mr. Martin about AWOL, didn't you?
Yes, before that phone call.
Okay.
Before the phone call with the two.
Or the one with the two of them. And you recorded that one too, didn't you?
I did.
And you also didn't have his permission to record in that time either, did you?
I did not.
Okay. And in that first call, then, Mr. Martin told you to provide explanations of your absences in an email to Ms. Rivera, didn't he?
He did.
Okay. Going back to board tab 33, I'm going to be looking, it's page 30 to 33.
Okay.
Now, page 30, I know that's not an email you've seen, but I believe you have acknowledged that you did have a conversation with Mr. Martin on July 17th, 2020, where he explained how annual leave worked.
Yeah, I mean, I was telling more about, about whether I could not request annual leave and request another type of leave, which I didn't know at the time, was LWOP.
Okay, but, sorry, go ahead.
And then whether I could skip lunch.
Okay. But you would agree, though, that this email describes the gist of the conversation you had with him?
I'm sorry, I will have to read it quickly.
Go ahead.
I can confirm that the two questions were rightfully stated, because that's what I called about.
Okay.
Yes, and then the information that he provided below. Yes, so I believe that's exactly what we discussed.
Your Honor, I hate to do this, but we've been going for about 2.5 hours. Is there any chance we could have about a 5-minute break?
Yeah. I'm gathering you still have a significant amount of cross left.
Probably a half hour, or at least. I don't know exactly, but I'm hopeful to get through it pretty quickly. I've been going quicker than I expected, but it's been
okay.
2.5 hours.
No, it's been over 2 hours, so I think that's a reasonable request. So we'll take a 5-minute break. Please don't review any documents or have any discussions while we're on break. Just a quick 5-minute comfort break for everyone, and then we'll come back on. So let's go off the record.
We are off the record at 10:59 a.m.